Hey, welcome back to the show. Let's check out the Parametric EQ for dialing some metal tones. Hopefully I can give you some hints and tips just to make it work better for you in the effects loop, but stick around. There's loads of different parametric EQs out there on the market, and they're fairly intimidating to a lot of people, but essentially they're all based around the same design, and we'll just try and work through it today. Used in the effects loop, the EQ is probably the most powerful tool you can have in your whole chain. If you use it in the front end of the guitar amp, it's not going to have the same effect, as it only changes that input signal going into the front end of the amp, and it tends to work more of just like a boost or an overdrive of that nature. It's only in the effects loop that you actually get the full sculpting potential and just change the whole output of how the amp works. I'm using the Master Effects EQ from hell today. It's a really straightforward, simple parametric EQ. It's just the 3 bands of bass, middle and treble, and they're all really transparent. So the basic operation for all para EQs is you've got standard gain dials for each of your bands, and then under those you've got the frequency dials that can shift the actual gain and focus in on the frequency that you're actually working on. And then under those you've got the bandwidth or the Q, which changes the actual width of each of the curves that you're working on. And those 3 dials for each band just allow you to really accurately focus in on certain tones, blend things together and just make your EQ really powerful. And what I love so much about para EQs using the effects loop over graphic EQs, you can essentially have 2 different dials from a treble and a mid, and you can aim them both together so that they're really just working and they're almost overlapping with the same frequencies. And then you can change the bandwidth and the Qs, and different frequencies just tend to spike within each other, and you get some really obscure style EQing of tones. You can't really do that with a graphic EQ. So getting straight into it, this is the core tone I've got through my guitar amp without the EQ engaged. If we turn the EQ on now with all the dials at 12 o'clock and the volume set, it should be totally transparent. And I guess from there, if we just work on that same tone, just going for that Allison Hell Annihilator sort of tone, we got to try and make it sound more like a JSM 800, where the mids are a lot more punchy. There could be a little bit more low end, but it's definitely a little bit different the way the 5150 is here. I think there's like more punch in those mids. So if you just start turning the mids a little tiny bit, and from there I just really think about the tone and work out whether it's got more of those percussive higher mids like scratchy a chainsaw, or it's more thumpy in that low mid region. And for that I think it's just got that slightly sort of more percussive. That might be a little bit too choppy, so you can just back it off slightly and bring in a little tiny bit of bass as well. And to me that sounds pretty good. It's a fairly subtle sort of change we've done to the EQ there, but it just seemed to push the frequencies the right direction just to complete that tone. So a tone that comes to mind that's just really unique and really identifiable, has a totally different sound. It's Megadeth's Rust in Peace, and to me that's just a really sort of mid-focus style tone. It's got a fizzy top end on it. There's not a lot of bass going on, but it's a really cool thrash tone, and we'll just see how close we can get with the Para EQ. So the first thing I'll do there is just bring back that bass and maybe just cut the treble just slightly, just try and get that more of that fizzy sort of top end. We need some more mids going on there. And from there, when I've got the gain dial set and I think that we're roughly in the ballpark, I'll then move to the frequency dials where we'll just try and tune in and actually tune to where the tone just seems to sit best. This is a really hard one to explain, but it's the second part of doing this. If I try and take out some of those lower bass frequencies, or I take out some of the higher bass frequencies or the lower mids, I think cutting some of those higher bass frequencies, it's more cutting those higher mids, and that's really the body and the scope of this tone. So I'll just bring it back. We'll just cut some of those lower bass frequencies and it just seems to have more of that mid-focus body in the tone. But I think with the higher frequencies here, if we bring back that frequency and cut and really narrow in on a certain bandwidth in those higher mids, we might just get that fizzy sort of top end to really poke its head through. And that's really just giving us that fizzier, smoother style top end. It's more like the album. And then lastly, we just want to focus the mid frequency, just where we're pushing that gain. Just if we push it too high, we're just going to end up with this really sort of abrasive style mids, and too low, it just starts to get a little bit muffled. But I think we're really close to getting this tone now, and what I can see is the two frequencies, the highs and the mids, they're almost overlapping, so those curves are going to be going over the top of each other. And what I find now, it's the bandwidths themselves, changing the cues on each of the curves. They make really dramatic differences now to the tone, and you can just make it sit exactly where you want. Hopefully that made a little bit of sense exactly how we got to that tone, but just another example, if we try and dial in like a Dimebag Pantera, like Cowboys from Hell style tone, he had loads of bass going on for that guitar tone. A lot of people think that you've got to scoop the mids to get a Dimebag tone, but when you really think about that Cowboys from Hell, the mid's almost like that half-cocked sort of wah tone. It's got that quacky sort of essence to it. So if we just turn up the gain on the mids for this, but it's in that high mid region, so again, it's a really hard one to try and describe and walk through, but those mids, if we just turn those right up there and just have the frequency there, I think a lot of it comes down to the treble range and just how we cut that and the focus that we actually have on that. A lot of this tone really just isn't that heavy low end. There's those quacky mids, and then the trebles, they've got an abrasive sort of treble, but at the same time it's sort of fizzy, almost like the Rust in Peace treble. And right now our bands really are just crossing over a whole lot. They might have even gone slightly past each other, but we really are just playing off the curves on those high mids, and we'll just try and focus the bandwidths now just so that they just really sit the same and you get that same Dimebag tone. And that seems pretty good actually. It's not too bad. It's a really weird way about getting the tone, but maybe a little bit more mids there. And that's a pretty close tone actually, considering we've gone about this a completely different way than Dimebag actually did on those albums, with EQs in totally different spots and had them in the front end and things. But we've seemed to sort of focus on the right frequencies and we get in the ballpark all the same. And that's actually a really cool tone, but lastly I just want to get Injustice for All if we can, or just get as close as we can. It's a totally different front end to an amp, but we'll just try and get that EQ all the same. But when I think of that tone, it's immense with the bass, it's hollow in the mids, there's nothing really going on there. It's dry in the top end, it's pretty clinical, and there's not too much treble, but it's definitely got like a bite to it. So if we just bring back the mids, and I guess with this tone, a lot of it that comes down to it is exactly what mid frequencies are we going to just suck out of this whole tone. But I think if we just go with the higher mid frequencies to start with, we've got the treble frequencies, and I actually want some of that treble to actually come through on this tone. So I'm not going to bring those down and cut them exactly the same. We'll just leave them up. And this really is one of the hardest tones to ever dial with an EQ. The front end of this amp is all wrong for this specific tone, but we're just trying to really just make the whole body of the guitar sound similar to that. And that really is such a difficult tone to try and get. We came a lot close with the other tones we dialed in, but that one's just totally unique and really difficult. But hopefully today I can just help out somehow to anyone struggling dialing in a Para EQ, and just shed some light on just different ways you can go about using it. There's so many different tones to have. Don't be intimidated by them. They're really good. Just take it simple, one thing at a time. You don't have to go to full extremes. But all that being said, guys, really hope you enjoyed it, and take care. I'll see you next time. Bye.